Hi everybody, book part 5, part 2. As the storm continued and oceans continued to roar overhead, the intensifying hurricane moved in closer to Hope Reef. Professor Clark signaled everyone to either start descending into deeper waters or they need to find refuge in a secure cave or crevice. Professor Clark took the lead with Ray, Holt, Rena, and most of Hope Reef's inhabitants, following him through the churning water. Hope, clinging on to Professor Clark, yelled out in a new-found boldness, "Whee! We're going to have a hurricane!" Finally, Professor Clark found a safe spot surrounded by a deep cave and some large rocks. Now that we were safe, Professor Clark, Ray, Holt, and Rita would rest and wait for the storm to pass. Now that we are all together, Professor Clark began saying, "Let me explain what a hurricane is. A hurricane is an extraordinary large storm that forms over the ocean when the ocean water is warm enough warm water vapor rises and is replaced by air. The cool air warms up and starts to evaporate. The water cycle can cause huge storms to form. These storms clouds can begin to spin the earth, which is called the Coriolis effect, and an organized storm forms. If there is enough warm water, moist air, the cycle can continue and the storm will continue stronger and stronger. Now that I've told you what a hurricane is, let me explain how they are actually beneficial to our ocean's homes. Hurricanes actually keep the oceans around the world from becoming too warm by churning the water top layer of the ocean with the deep, cooler water. It is called upwelling. Hurricanes also enrich the reef with oxygenated water," the wise professor finished saying. As hours stretched by, the sounds of crashing waves could still be heard, even though they were much deeper and deeper water. From time to time, Rita and several friend dolphins made the arduous journey to the ocean surface so that they could get much-needed air. While Rita was there, she studied the weather's condition and also took notes to monitor the storm's progress. Each time Rita returned, she would share with Professor Clark what she was observing at the ocean's surface. The others, particularly Holt, sighed with relief for Rita's return. Rita's willingness to educate herself and the others impressed Professor Clark, the science shark, and he rewarded her educational effort with the words of praise. "Rita, you have done an amazing job in listening closely and taking notes for us. Thank you, Professor Clark," voiced with approval. Rita blushed and added, "I just love ocean research, and I hope that I can help you teach the next generation about hurricanes and our oceans." Professor Clark and Ray looked at each other, and with a gleam in his eye, Ray asked, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking? I'm feeling a new name coming on for our newest friends. What do you think of Rita the research turtle?" Ray explained with exuberance, "She's not only beautiful, but she's also very smart." Rita clapped her fins with excitement, while Professor Clark high-fived Ray to show his approval of Rita's new title. After what seemed like days, the sounds of crashing waves became less deafening. Professor Clark knew that the worst of the storm was over, so he told everyone that it wouldn't be long before they could all go back to Hope Reef. "Let's just hope that everyone fares as well as we did," he announced to the group. While they waited to go back, Professor Clark and Ray made their way around the ocean to see how everyone was doing. Aside from some shattered and frayed nerves, most of the sea creatures did fine. Professor Clark knew, however, that not everyone would have survived as they returned home. He looks worried. After a while, the group realized that it was time for them to return home and check on any damage caused by the storm. Everyone was unusually quiet as they made their way back to Hope Reef. As expected, the worst, but hope for the best. As they swam, they passed many casualties of the storm that would soon become part of the ocean's food chain. Sea fans with exposed roots littered the ocean's floor, along with many species of coral poppies. Professor Clark hesitated when he saw the destruction, as he respected the natural balance found in food chains and knew not to interfere with the balance. But it still made him very sad. You can see that he's crying. And look at Ray the remora. Soon they reached their home at Hope Reef, but the hope that they left wasn't the home to which they returned. Everybody, including Professor Clark, stared in disbelief at what had become of their ocean home. Nearby on land, a young man named Andrew waited in concern for the safety of his fish friends and hoped that their natural instincts would keep them safe. Andrew was the human who shared a special bond with Professor Clark and all of his ocean friends. Andrew had saved Rita. When she had become ill, she had also cleaned up Hope Reef. Helped by family and friends, realized that it was the pollution on the reef that had made Rita ill. Now, after a hurricane had struck the eastern Atlantic Ocean, he wanted to make sure his favorite reef and aquatic friends were safe after the storm. Andrew waited nervously for the local severe weather meteorologists, the people that watch the water or watch the weather, to declare an all clear, which meant the storm had long passed and it was safe to go outside. Andrew knew he had to check on Professor Clark and Hope Reef as soon as possible. It was getting late in the afternoon, so he grabbed his scuba gear and a high-powered dive light just in case. He also knew he needed a dive buddy for safety, so he asked his father, Scott, to go. The two men jumped into Andrew's boat that was safely docked behind their house and survived the storm unharmed. Look how beautiful after the storm. What normally would have been a short boat ride down the Lochochi River intercoastal waterways to the ocean and Hope Reef became a much longer one. Andrew had to dodge several fallen trees and debris in the water left by the storm. They cruised past the usual beautiful beaches, which one had been lined with palm trees, and they both noticed how it looked bare, ghostly, and desolated. Andrew looked at his dad with optimism and hoped that his cherished reef was okay. They continued their way to Hope Reef, located just 2.5 miles off Jupiter's shoreline. Andrew steered the boat cautiously. As debris was floating throughout the seas, the waves and the winds had calmed down and were replaced by gently rolling swells. Andrew proceeded due east and knew Hope Reef was just up ahead. There were still plenty of clouds around in the sky. As evening started to roll in, the large cumulus clouds made Hope Reef usually dark. As soon as they arrived, however, Andrew and Scott saw something quite amazing and miraculous. Suddenly, as if on cue, the whole area in the ocean that surrounded Hope Reef lit up with amazing, glorious light. It was as if somebody was installed fluorescent lights, which Andrew knew was impossible. Suddenly, Andrew realized what it was. Dad, we are experiencing a bioluminescent effect. This is totally amazing. They have arrived at Hope Reef with gloom and despair, but the lights gave them hope. The lights gave them peace that no matter what had happened, all was going to be okay. Come on, Dad, let's dive in, Andrew said while he was putting on his gear. After both were suited up, they made their way into the brightly lit, watery world of Hope Reef. Look at what they see. Andrew's dive light showed the two men the vast destruction the storm had wreaked on Hope Reef. Remnants of coral and other sea structures were scattered about, and the once abundant sea life was nowhere to be seen. The minutes seemed like hours as they searched for Professor Clark or Rita and their other friends. Little did they know that the gang had all gone to the safety of deep waters as Professor Clark had instructed. Suddenly, through shadowy figures, here's their shadowy figures, slowly emerged through the churning up ocean waters. Andrew saw that it was his shark friend, Professor Clark, with Ray, Holt, and Rita. Andrew was so relieved to see that they were all okay. Andrew saw that it was his tiger shark's friend, Professor Clark, with Ray, Holt, and Rita. Andrew was so relieved to see that they were all okay. Professor Clark was overwhelmed with emotion. When he saw Andrew and his dad, Andrew realized what his shark friend was feeling by the expression on his face. Obviously, Professor Clark is sad. There's the tears. There's Andrew and his dad. Rita was by his side, along with Ray and Holt. With their heads hung low in sadness, Andrew knew he had to do something to cheer his aquatic friends up. So Andrew pointed to the light all around them. He then motioned to them to follow him to the water surface, as there was something he needed to say. At the surface, Andrew took off his scuba mask and quickly pointed to the beautiful bioluminescent lights around them. He smiled and said, "I don't know if any of you will be able to understand this, but everything is going to be okay. The lights are a sign of telling me so." Andrew reassured the sharks and the friends. What Andrew didn't know was Professor Clark didn't understand, and he trusted Andrew's words just as he trusted Andrew. There was an unspoken understanding that Andrew would somehow restore his reef. Andrew made a very bold yet promising statement. "We will rebuild and make a better, stronger, and healthier reef. You can count on that." That was only the beginning of the story. A new reef was built, one of many actually, in the beautiful Atlantic Ocean underwater paradise offshore of Jupiter, Florida. Very soon, many of the Professor Clark's marine friends would call this new reef environment their wonderful home for life. Let's take a look at that reef again. I hope you enjoyed Professor Clark, the Science Shark.